This video is going to be a little bit differently structured than I usually do in other videos. But today I'm going to give you my top 3 reasons why Christians should fast. So now a disclaimer I would give is that fasting is not a commandment that God gives us. It is not a requirement for salvation, yet there are a lot of benefits that comes with fasting. And so the purpose of this video is to show you why you should fast, and maybe it's pertaining to a situation or a deep spiritual battle you're going through in your lives. Now, for the first thing to mention is, what is fasting? Because so many of us get this wrong. It is a period of time where you are devoted to God fully, where all your attention is on God. It's usually associated when you are abstaining away from food, so when you're not eating food for a long period of time. But it could just be even more than that. Maybe it's off of technology for a little bit. But usually the biblical fast is involving abstaining away from food for a long period of time where you and God are together. You have a set time for prayer and all your attention is devoted to God and God alone. Now, for the 3 reasons why I would recommend someone to fast, and I'm going to provide you verses here today, is that it is a deep time to depend and grow closer to God, especially during times of spiritual warfare. This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 through 18, which is on the Sermon on the Mount, the greatest sermon possibly ever said in existence. And this is what Jesus says: "Now, whenever you fast, do not put on a gloomy face as hypocrites do, for they neglect their appearances so that they will be noticed by men when they are fasting. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full." Verse 17. "But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face." Verse 18. "So that your fasting will not be noticed by men, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." And so the point of fasting is to have a deep time of reflection with God where you are focused on God only, which is what I mentioned as a definition. The problem with the Pharisees back then was they were doing fasting as a show for everyone to know, but it should not be like that. Fasting with God should be something one-on-one where literally nobody doesn't have to know, and it should be in a secret place where you can just focus on God. The problem with the Pharisees is that their attention wasn't on God, their attention was on pleasing the crowd around them. And so that is not going to help you grow deeper with God. The second reason why fasting is important is that it is associated with deep prayer times. It kind of goes hand in hand with reason 1. You can see many righteous people in the Bible often fasted. Nehemiah is one who fasted when rebuilding the walls for Jerusalem. Daniel is another person who fasted. Jesus is another person who fasted, as we know in Matthew chapter 4, which is when he faced temptations from the devil. But in Matthew 17, this is in context of when the disciples aren't able to cast out a demon, and Jesus explains why they aren't. It's because they didn't have enough faith, the kind of faith that is as small as a mustard seed that can move mountains. And he says in verse 21 that this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. So in Matthew 17, verse 21, Jesus is basically saying that you cannot cast this demon out except only when you are in deep times of prayer and fasting. Now, I want to say that this verse may not even be wasn't even in some early manuscripts, but the implication is there that fasting is often associated with prayer. And so when we pray, there is a time where fasting is there. And that is the point of fasting. It is not just to have a diet control. That's very fleshly and doesn't benefit in the end. The point of fasting is mainly for prayer to God, being closer to God. And because we love God, we want to do these things for God. The final reason is that the disciples were expected to fast when the bridegroom was gone. And this is from Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 20. And this is what Jesus said. This is what the passage says. And John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and they came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Verse 19, and Jesus said to them, "Can the attendants of the bridegroom fast when the bridegroom is with them? So long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast." Verse 20, but the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. And so Jesus is saying to the people that he's talking to, yes, even though John's disciples and the Pharisees fast, there is a appointed time where his disciples will fast as well. But they're not going to fast when Jesus is there, because again, fasting is often associated with prayer and mourning. But why do the disciples have to mourn when Jesus is there present? But when he's gone, for example, when he was crucified, it was expected for the disciples to fast. And so my point here is that if the disciples are expected to fast, and they are our example, and Jesus is our example, why shouldn't we? So as I end off this video, again, want to mention that fasting is not a requirement for salvation. If you don't do it, then it's fine. But I think for those who are going through deep spiritual warfare and want to connect and become closer with God, it will definitely help a lot. And it has helped me a lot. And the second thing I'll end off with is that the spiritual warfare is not going to go away, right? Christians are going to go through spiritual warfare soon. And sometimes it even intensifies. That happened with Jesus when he was fasting in the wilderness for 40 days. Devil came to tempt him. That will often happen to those, especially for me, when I fast. Spiritual warfare often comes in my way after I fast. But I can have assurance because I know that the fasting that I do is supposed to be associated with God. And so even though maybe more spiritual warfare will come, you will be equipped to know how to handle that because of the time that you spend with God. And so I hope this video helped you into understanding a little bit about fasting, and hopefully maybe you will do it someday in your life, especially during the summertime. On that note, take care and God bless.